how serious I am with this. It's my life now. Hey guys, it's Jessica here and I'm back with another bookish video, and this is very special. In honor of Shadow and Bone being released about a week ago, I am here to do a book to screen review. So basically I'm gonna tell you what's up with the adaptation from the book, and I have separated this review into parts and I'm actually very excited to do this. Okay, so Shadow and Bone is a new Netflix original series with 8 episodes. It's adapted from Lee Bardugo's Grishaverse world, and originally the first 3 books in it were Grishaverse trilogy. This 3 that you see here were newly acquired, and the series is based on the first book, Shadow and Bone. Also interspersed with the characters and the backstory of another of her books. It's a duology. It's set in the same world but in a different timeline. It's Six of Crows up there, these two. The first one, Six of Crows. The show actually follows the story of Shadow and Bone, but the characters from Six of Crows appear in there too, and it's kind of a prequel. The duology is set, I think, 2 years after the trilogy ended. Kind of what these characters here were doing during this time. The backstory: I first read Six of Crows duology when I was in high school. A friend recommended it to me and we loved it. Hi, Martha. When we learned that there was a show coming out, we were like, we gotta watch it. Because Six of Crows are our lives, basically. So we had to watch it, but we wanted to relate also with the story. So we started reading that trilogy. So it's kind of fresh to me. Also, shout out to my friend, hi Jelai. She was the one who basically told me that maybe I could do a book to screen review with this, and it was not really hard to convince me. I'm going to start with my reaction. Obviously, I loved it. I'm gonna get more critical later, just wait for that. But here is a clip of me being excited over that one scene. You have no idea how many times I replayed that certain scene. Something I've been waiting to see since I read it. So I obviously loved everything. The props and the costumes were amazing. I personally want a kefta. I mean, especially Alina's. It's just this blue base, kind of royal blue, I think, with this gold embroidery everywhere. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's perfect for our main character. The cast did an amazing job. I mean, while reading the trilogy, there were some parts where it was hard for me to imagine these cast as these certain characters, especially with their accent. I don't know, I can't read with an accent, I think. Not all of them were close to how I imagined the characters, but some of them were very accurate. I can feel the character from them too. I don't know if it makes sense, but they may not look like how I imagined the character, but the vibes the character gives off when I'm reading, it's just there with them while I'm seeing them on screen. This next part would actually have a lot of spoilers, especially for the show, and a few ones from the books. So if you do not want to get spoiled with any of those, well, you know, you gotta go. It's fine. Thanks for staying up to this point, but if you do not want to get spoiled, I do advise you to just go. But for this part, what I'm actually doing is I'm just gonna point out the changes that I've seen, and I'm gonna do this by episode. Let's start with episode 1. The first change I saw there was Alina and Mal mentioned in the show that they're both from Karamzin, but in the book they never mentioned it. Alina says this, like, I think twice in the course of the first few chapters, that Mal and her would always say that they're from the same village, they grew up together, they're childhood friends, but they would never ever mention that they're orphans or that they grew up in Karamzin. So next is going into the fold. In the show, there's like only a few people from the First Army who are assigned to cross the fold with the Grisha, and Mal was assigned there. In the book, originally, it's just First Army crossed with the Grisha all the time. I think First Army actually outnumber the number of Grishas on the skiff when they travel. And in the book, cartographers actually go on the skiff because it's dark and it's the head cartographer that tells the squaller when to turn, when to go, but that did not happen in the show, obviously. But I think it's a good point to actually have Mal and Alina being separated kind of by this fold, and Alina taking these steps, doing these risks, because it chooses just how much Alina would do anything just to be with Mal. The next change is originally in the book, Alexei was killed. He died in the fold but this is not too major, but it was nice to see how they connected the two sets of characters from different countries, because a show, Alexei survives. He's able to walk throughout the fold alive, and then he gets taken, and then that's where we meet the crows. That's where their worlds kind of converge. So in episode 2, this is where we first hear that there's actually a device Grishas used to test little children if they're Grisha. There's this thing that pricks the children, and their Grisha would show powers because of the immense pain. However, in the book, all it was is that there's a human amplifier that comes in by a touch. A power should surge up. But it's worth pointing that because of this, Alina purposely hurts herself, and that's how she got her scar, because to make sure that she wouldn't pass the test. Next is, it's interesting to see that from the beginning we see Fedior's fate, because in the books we only see him much on the second one, where he starts to side with Alina and to show that my faith is in you and that you have my support. It's nice to see in the show that from the very beginning, on their way to the little palace for the very first time, we see Fedior talking to Alina, saying that I believe in you, that this is not a mistake, and that you will be able to do whatever you're meant to do. The next thing I saw was, this is where General Kerrigan used the cut, and honestly it's something I've been waiting for since I read that. I wanted to see how the cut works. But General Kerrigan mentions to Alina that the cut is something only summoners can do, and that's actually not mentioned in the books. He says in the books that it's a very powerful kind of weapon, and only very few Grisha can use it. So the Darkling never said only summoners, so that's something different with the show. But it actually makes sense after all. That's probably just clearing things up from the lapses in the book. And last from this episode, we go to Ketterdam, and this is where Tante Helene actually gives Inej that choice to free herself, because in the books we only ever hear of Kaz paying for Inej so she can be set free, and it's nice to know that Inej had a choice in that she did not fully rely on Kaz's wealth or whatever Kaz can steal. I mean, she had that choice. She could have been the one to free herself. Here in episode 3, there's not a lot of changes, but the very first thing that I noticed was the name of the king. Genya says the name of the king is Pyotr, so King Pyotr. Originally in the book it's King Alexander III, but I do understand this change because we do get to know General Kerrigan's real name, which is Alexander. Funny thing is, they actually have different spellings. General Kerrigan's Alexander is KS, and the King's Alexander is X in the books. So I do get the change. The next is something the Apparat mentioned. The Apparat mentioned that amplifiers that the Grisha would use would have to be molded into their body. We see, I guess, from the books that it's just some accessory, like Fedior has this bear claws on his necklace, and Alina only had like a collar kind of thing, and a bracelet. Yes. In the show, the apparat mentions it had to be molded into their bodies. But it's very interesting that they did this because seeking power is not something that should be easy. So having this change from the book to the show shows that, you know, not every grisha could just seek an amplifier. They couldn't just want a new bracelet or a special necklace. It has to be, they really have to give up something because it has to be on their body, basically a part of them, something that they can't remove. I like that. That was very interesting and a little scary to see. So here in episode 4, there's just one major change that I would like to point out. We know that Alina has this scar, and apparently in the show, Mal and Alina kind of match. They both have that scar on their hand. And in the show, Alina asks Genya to remove that scar that she had from when she was young. So that was very symbolic. It symbolizes Alina actually letting go of Mal, and I think that's the only clear thing we see in the show, that Alina's letting go of this person from her old life because apparently he doesn't want me and stuff like that. That was actually really sad. I mean, something that cannot be reversed. It shows just how much in pain she was. This episode, I think I have a lot of things. So first, of course, we focus on the winter feet. In the beginning, Genya tells Alina that maybe after the performance where Alina's wearing the black kefta with the gold embroidery, that she can change into her blue kefta with the gold embroidery. And Alina says that she'd like to stick with the black. It's really interesting because in that scene where it happened was the exact opposite of what was in the book. It's a very creative way. They've shown that Alina's choosing General Kerrigan, and Genya is very concerned for Alina. Maybe she's losing herself. And I didn't mind that change much. Next here is, originally Marie was never a decoy Alina. Marie dying here in the show was very surprising, and that death scene was so tragic that she accepted that she was gonna die, and that her wish was not to be saved, but her wish was to die with her own face. Originally, Marie dies in the second book, and she dies in an ambush. And in the books, Marie kind of had a boyfriend, and we never heard of boyfriend, Sergei, in the show. Like, he was never mentioned, or that's something missing on the show from the books. But I guess it doesn't affect much with Marie dying if there's no Sergei. But I think if they're gonna push the show to 3 seasons, there's a few of the changes did here that's gonna affect that. And that's Sergei, mostly. He plays a big role, especially in Ruin Rising. You have to find a new way for the story to get there because Sergei is missing. Sergei basically is non-existent. The next change here is Bagra mentions that there are certain grishas that are loyal to her, and I've never once heard that. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but most of the grisha did not like Bagra, and Bagra just generally does not like people. So it's very surprising to actually have grishas that are loyal to her and not to General Kerrigan. So that's something, and I'd like to see more of that, definitely, in the future. And yes, this is me pressuring Netflix to continue the series. The next is where Bagra instructs Alina on what to do. The first change is that originally, Bagra wants Alina to escape the palace, to sneak out with the dancers, and to cross the fold on her own, basically just hide from the Darkling. And in the show, Bagra says that you take this path, and I have grishas that are loyal to me that will protect you until we find a way on what we can do against this thing. It's also nice to see that Alina did not follow Bagra's instructions, because it's like, yes, I do believe you, Bagra, that your son is wanting to do something evil, but I'm also not gonna fully trust you because you've never been kind to me, and why should I think that you're easily gonna betray your son? So she took another path. The first thing I have for episode 6 is very interesting. I don't think it's a change because we never really hear about Nina's life in the Little Palace or before 6 of Crows, besides her backstory with Matthias. So General Kerrigan mentioning that Nina was a spy for him was very interesting because you never really would have thought. I mean, when the conductor said that Nina hates kind of serving one master, something like that, it made sense because yes, that's how Nina Zenik is. But it actually also makes sense that Nina is a spy for General Kerrigan because Nina would have never thought of him as an enemy because he's making life better for all the Grisha. And Nina, being one, just sees that as, you know, something nice. And we know that the Heartrenders are the favorite Grisha of Darkling, and Nina is a Heartrender and a very good one at that. So it actually makes sense that Nina is loyal to him because he appreciates her after all. So that was surprising and cool. Next is we see more of Zoya and General Kerrigan's relationship. I don't know, what I inferred from the books was that Zoya was just a favorite student, but you know, she's not as favorite as Alina was, and that's the Zoya-Alina trouble in the book was because Zoya is, after all, just another scholar. In the show, we see that they actually have a very physical relationship, Zoya and Kerrigan. So that's something. It makes Alina coming in and basically being the new love interest for Kerrigan much more personal to Zoya. It's as if she's being set aside, that she's just a whore and not someone that's actually wanted somehow. Next is Mal and Alina get their reunion, and Mal wants to just escape for him and Alina to just cross the fold, but Alina's like, no, we have to follow the stag because I think it's meant for me. In the books, it's the exact opposite of that. It's Alina who just wants to run away, cross the fold, and live another life. And it's Mal that says, no, I think the stag was meant for you. So episode 7 starts with General Kerrigan's backstory. And it's not the backstory that we get from the books because my copy of Ruin and Rising has a bonus content. It's not the backstory that we see in the show. And it's a completely different story. Personally, one of the scenes that I least like, this backstory kind of situation. Also, another thing to point out is that this girl, Luda, calls him Alexander. And he wants to introduce himself to Alina as Alexander. So now, he's just Alexander to everyone. In the books, that backstory, he actually has many names. It just depends on where they're from, where they're going, he takes on different names. And I would have loved to see that because, you know, he has many names. He's pretended to be so many people. He's pretended to live these lives. And it kind of loses the impact that he's just Alexander to everyone. It seems something normal. And in the books, it was something much more. The next is he mentions Morozova and that we are his bloodline. He says that. And that's not a shocker if you read the books. But I feel like it's too early. There were a lot of secrets that were only revealed to like the third book of the trilogy and were revealed in like the very first season, which I get it because when they filmed it, when they made it, they only knew that have one season. But it's kind of too easy now. The next is Alina was never told of the stag. It's having these dreams of the stag, and Kerrigan stole this drawing that Alina made. In the books, it was the Darkling that tells Alina that I will find the stag for you. I believe the stag was meant for you. So I'd find it for you and I'd give it to you. So the Darkling does tell Alina what the stag is. But in the show, nothing. No conversation like that. This, I don't have much, but I just love Mal teaming up with the crows. Obviously, that's not in the books, but that is something amazing to see Also, of course, it's very nice if we get Alina and Ned just talking to each other. Next is, we have Zoya taking a stand and basically not siding with General Kerrigan anymore. We never see that outright in the books. We only ever see that Zoya tells Alina that I'd follow you and I'd stay to fight for you. Begrudgingly, but I'd do it. That concludes my per episode breakdown with all these changes, and I now want to get into just generally what's my general thoughts in the show. And honestly, maybe this is just me, maybe because I was overly critical, but the show itself as a show, as a standalone, wasn't much. It was lacking in a lot of parts. The story felt rushed, which I understand in like 8 episodes. Of course, it felt rushed, but a lot of characters weren't developed much. A lot of relationships weren't developed much. We never see Genya and Alina's friendship, or basically Genya being an important person in this story. We did see General Kerrigan and Alina's relationship kind of grow, but we never really see much of it. It's not as well-rounded, I guess, as it was in the books, and that's understandable. As an adaptation, it was nice, but as a show, I think a lot of parts of it were missing, and that's what kind of irks me. The next, I don't know, I know nothing about cinematography. I'm no expert or anything, but there were some close-ups, especially with Mal and Alina, that, I don't know, it felt kind of awkward to me. It was weird. The next change that is kind of major, and actually I personally didn't like, it's with Alina's power, Alina's light. It has bluish, reddish, orange tints as compared to in the books, which I think it's pure light. And when Alina summons, when she summons light in the show, it's just like a ball that actually looks like the sun, I think. Kind of looks like the sun, which is nice. But in the books, I think it always comes out in beams kind of thing. And personally, I like that more, which it's just pure white. And that change in the show honestly made it look a little weaker than it was in the books. So now we go to General Kerrigan and the Darkling. Having a name, I get that. It makes him more human. But we lost the impact, especially that he keeps on introducing himself as Alexander, his real name. The name lost its impact. I love the ending of Ruin and Rising with, you know, the burning of the Darkling's body, and no one knows his name, so no one can persecute that, but only Alina does, and it's like their secret, and she whispers that name just in honor of not just a soldier, not just a Darkling, but a boy who had hopes and who had this kind of future with him. It's very tragic. Their goal was to put this guy into a different light, in a different kind of situation than he was in the books, and they definitely succeeded there. And that's what I'm gonna get into next, is that in the books, the Darkling is pictured as this anti-hero, that he suffered through these kind of things, and that he's doing these because he wants people like him, the Grisha, to be accepted. And from the show, General Kerrigan, he ends up being pictured just as a cruel, selfish being. He's not as tragic as the Darkling was in the books. Next is, you know, General Kerrigan is always known as a general, but it's nice to see that there are certain people that call him the Darkling. So it has that title, and while we're in the area of titles, it's nice that there was a mention once, at least once, of Dirty Hands and once of Wraith, because everyone agrees with this. Show Mal is so much better than Book Mal, because Book Mal is the biggest jerk, the biggest asshole, and in the show they completely changed that. He was better with his lines like, "Your powers don't scare me. I'm sorry it took so long for me to see you, but I see you now, and even you don't owe me an explanation." But it's also worth noting that the Mal and Alina reunion in the show is kind of lacking. There's this speech that we're all looking for that was in the book, where Mal was like, "I missed you every hour, every day, and I was thinking of you every night, and I was doing this because I wanted to see you and to get to you." That's speech that Mal had. It was not in the show. This next one is not major, but it's just with the pronunciation. In the show, they pronounce Inferni as Inferni. I pronounce it as Inferni, and my friend Martha also did pronounce it as Inferni. The next is with names. It's Ivan, which personally I thought was Ivan because it's Russian inspired and Ivan just seems too English. And the next is with Crown Prince Vasily. That's what Genya says, Vasily. And I thought I pronounced it as Vasily. Hi Marvel fans. There's a Vasily guy, right? And I think it was it's in Civil War. I don't remember how it's pronounced there, so I couldn't correct myself. So it was just always Vasily to me. Okay, so for this part, it's just basically all the questions I have about the ending. Mal and Alina is in the same boat as the crows. So does this mean Mal and Alina are just running off to Ketterdam now instead of originally on the way to Novi Zem? The next is Matthias and Nina are in the same boat. So does this mean that Matthias will be imprisoned in Ketterdam instead of originally Matthias being imprisoned in the ice court in Fjerda? That's where they break him out in Six of Crows. This part is basically everything that was not in the books but was in the show, but I absolutely love, so they get a pass. Jesper and Milo, or just Milo in general. Easily my favorite character from the show, Milo. It was also really nice that Milo plays a much bigger role, that he's not just this extra that we're all attached to. And next is Fedor and Ivan's relationship. So cute, and Fedor, I like him now more than I liked him in the books. He's a treasure, he must be protected. And with this new relationship that was made, Ivan choosing to still side with the Darkling and Fedor choosing to side with Alina, if they continue that in the books, despite them from the show being married, would put up a lot of questions and a lot of interesting moments. This next part is basically the Easter eggs I saw, or the foreshadowing I think they're doing. The very first one is when Alina was entering the fold, you can notice the scarf she was wearing, it was color blue with like a lining of gold. And it's actually alluding to her summoner scholars later in the future, where she's wearing it's blue summoners but gold because sun summoner. The next is Jesper just telling us that we need a demo man and we need someone who's expert with explosives, and this is obviously a nod to Wylan, the baby of the Six. And the next is Apparat once called Alina the Sol Koroleva, which is something we'll never hear anyone call her until like I think the second book. It actually means Sun Queen, and it's really nice that early on the Apparats already showing that you are much more than a sun summoner to me. You're a saint, you're a hero, you're a queen. Sol Koroleva. Before I end this video, I want to leave you guys a little of fun facts. First one is, do you know that there's a Ravkan copy of Shadow and Bone? And it's actually the one David was reading when he was in the Darkling's coach that he throws to Jesper. The next one is, while I was doing research, I was figuring out which of these terms was actually Russian and was actually just made up. And apparently, Oprichniki, they were actually like a title for a bodyguard corps that was established by Tsar Ivan the Terrible. So that's fun. So that's it guys, thank you so much for watching. This is a very long video and I did talk a lot, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope we can have a discussion in the comments down below, because I really want to talk about this. I want to see and hear a lot of point of views, and you know, I just want to talk about this world that I love so much. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!